Today, I'm going to tell you a story. But it is going to be one hell of a roller coaster. And it begins the morning of October the 10th, 2017. It's a curious tale of uncomfortable accusations, hard truths, and even harder looks into the mirror of the vision of our society and what it has become. Today, you will relive the experience of a year in review at the topsy-turvy way in which your reality can turn on its head and back again in a few excerpts from news articles and headlines. My investigation has brought with it some questions that I hope that you can answer at the end of this exploration of information. For instance, in what way are we meant to experience our world? Are we meant to experience things in small, incremental, and shocking bites that contrast from the last week's cycle of news? It would seem so. To me, at least. Another point. We've been taught for a while now that men are the rapists, constantly seeking to conquer for power, for greed, for sheer pleasure. Always men, they say, always men. But today, we don't tell the story of a man, no. We tell the story of Argento, a woman, who started off as a victim. From aggressive overtures to sexual assault, Harvey Weinstein's accusers tell their stories. At first, Weinstein was solicitous, praising her work, then he left the room. When he returned, he was wearing a bathrobe and holding a bottle of lotion. He asked me to give a massage. Argento said that after she reluctantly agreed to give Weinstein a massage, he pulled her skirt up, forced her legs apart, and performed oral sex on her as she repeatedly told him to stop. Weinstein terrified me, and he was so big, she said, it wouldn't stop. It was a nightmare. The thing with being a victim is I felt responsible, she said, because if I were a strong woman, I would have kicked him in the balls and run away. But I didn't. And so I felt responsible. I felt I had to, she said, because I had the movie coming out and I didn't want to anger him. She believed that Weinstein would ruin her career if she didn't comply. One, a woman who worked with Weinstein, explained her reluctance to be identified. He drags your name through the mud, and he'll come after you hard with his legal team. Dear listener, I want you to remember that. The sexual assault, how Asia felt afterwards, the people that she talked to and their experiences, because it will be important later on in this story that I have to tell. But you'll be interested to know that for her bravery and that of others, Asia and company, that being the company of the Me Too movement accusers, were awarded for their testimonies months, years, sometimes decades after the fact. Quote, Times Person of the Year, the Silence Breakers, for speaking out against sexual harassment. I ask you, dear listener, is it really bravery to face your accuser this long after the fact, amid the throes of other women's testimony, to prop yours up, and with the favor of public opinion on your side? Months later, more pigs will be revealed. Asia Argento on life after accusing Weinstein of rape. Italian actor welcomes the sexual misconduct expose, since but laments the slow awakening in her country. Her country, of course, being that of Italy. The consciences are waking, she told The Guardian. Every time one of these pigs falls, it's a badge of honor. You'll have to forgive me, dear listeners, I do not laugh out of the sheer enjoyment of the misfortunes and the misdeeds of others. It is with a deep sense of irony that I share in my own jest. Continuing with the themes of victimization, I've been called a whore for my part in the Me Too campaign. It won't stop me. For speaking my truth, I have been slut-shamed, victim-blamed, bullied, and threatened on a daily basis, and I am not alone. Such is the nature of the beast, I'm afraid. It is an affliction which no accuser of sexual assault is immune to, I'm afraid. All are men in positions of power, and of a now all too familiar type, who view women as chattel to service their sexual lust and to puff up their fragile egos, and who then, later, try to cover up their crimes with bribery, threats, and intimidation. Bribery, threats, and intimidation. A triad of tactics used by the powerful, the men, the rapists, if I'm not mistaken, right? But this is because I know how it ends, and perhaps you do as well, listener. Perhaps this archaeological dig through the past is as paradoxical to you as it is to me. Now, I do hope I've constructed a monumental enough image for you, one obelisk enough in creation that when I eventually tear it down, as I will, the reveal is as dramatic as it ought to be, listener. The next article I have to share with you is in fact a damning one. Asia Argento, a #MeToo leader, made a deal with her own accuser. In the months that followed her revelations about Mr. Weinstein last October, Miss Argento quietly arranged to pay $3,800,000 to her own accuser, Jimmy Bennett, a young actor and rock musician who said she had sexually assaulted him in a California hotel room years earlier, when he was only 2 months past his 17th birthday. She was 37, and the age of consent in California is 18. The documents, which were sent to the New York Times through encrypted email by an unidentified party, include a selfie dated May 9th, 2013, of the two lying in bed. As part of the agreement, Mr. Bennett, who is now 22, gave the photograph and its copyright to Miss Argento, now 42. 3 people familiar with the case said the documents were authentic. And here we are witness to the first of the triad that Asia outlined herself in one of her earlier statements that I mentioned in this video: bribery in exchange for silence. In October, a month before Mr. Bennett set his demand for money, the New Yorker published an article by Ronan Farrow that included Miss Argento among 13 women who accused Mr. Weinstein of harassment and rape. The document lays out Mr. Bennett's account. Miss Argento asked the family member to leave so she could be alone with the actor. She gave him alcohol to drink and showed him a series of notes she had written to him on hotel stationery. Then she kissed him, pushed him back on the bed, removed his pants, and performed oral sex. Now, if you were paying attention in the beginning of this video, dear listener, you would have noticed a stark resemblance in Mr. Bennett's account to that of Miss Argento's. A very curious resemblance indeed. Argento said that after she reluctantly agreed to give Weinstein a massage, he pulled her skirt up, forced her legs apart, and performed oral sex on her. Perhaps the resemblance is merely a creation of my own mind, but perhaps not. I'll leave you to decide on that one. And if physical intimacy with a minor, just shy of 18, weren't damning evidence enough, it turns out that Asia has been guilty of victimizing Jimmy since he was much younger. Rose McGowan claims that Argento received nude photos of Jimmy Bennett since he was 12. But what are mere accusations? Hush money doesn't necessarily merit a party automatically guilty of whatever it is that they're paying hush money towards, does it? Of course not. That would be ridiculous. Admission of guilt in a private correspondence, however, that is another matter entirely. If only we had that. Quote, she did, however, deny all accusations of sexual assault. Something, Dove says, was different from what she told them over text. Messages published by TMZ show Argento writing, I had sex with him, it felt weird. A truly damning piece of evidence that contradicts the initial story. There is still time, however, to save face, dear listener. Don't you fear for our main character. Asia Argento says it's time for phase 2 of Me Too denies sexual misconduct accusations. Asia believes that in phase 2 of the Me Too movement, everyone should come forward, tell their story, regardless of their past, which in Asia's circumstances constitutes a misunderstood interaction between her and Bennett that was initiated by Bennett, perpetrated upon Asia, and resulted in her freezing and being placed in a state of shock. You might be wondering exactly what phase 2 of Me Too movement entails, my dear listeners. What could possibly come next? Well, if it weren't clear, the last statement, quote, interaction between her and Bennett that was initiated by Bennett, perpetrated upon Asia, and resulted in her freezing and being placed in a state of shock, is the setup for the very next chapter in our story. Because the next thing we know, the hush money ceases. And then this happens. Asia Argento claims she is a victim of sexual attack by former co-star Jimmy Bennett. Actress issued a news statement via her lawyer which claims that she was the victim of the alleged incident, not Bennett. At this juncture, it is unclear which pillar of the Me Too movement triad this new development falls under. Threat? Intimidation? Either way, the message is clear. Should Mr. Bennett pursue further legal action to receive his just deserts, Miss Argento will return in kind. A modern spin on the classic tale of he said, she said, with many, many added twists. Now, whether or not she herself is backed with the blessing of her movement will remain to be seen, but it seems that a year after its inception, we have come across the first of what I can guarantee will be many, many hiccups on this road to determining reality, or at least our new reality. Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes perceptions change, often with resistance, and this is no exception. We've been taught that men are the rapists, constantly seeking to conquer for power, for greed, for sheer pleasure. Always man, they say. For some, it is a reality written in the very litigation that governs our lands. For some, it is presented to us on a shiny platter, as the definitions upon which we rely in our thirst for knowledge, that we make our own judgments about the world. But for yet more, it's a seed sown quietly and nestled deep in our media, gently forced day after day upon our minds. But at a certain point, we must ask ourselves a very important question. Are they truly the victim? Or are they merely a victim in sheep's clothing? And can you be both? Now, if you like what I'm doing here, you can check out the links in the description to my Amazon Patreon on Teespring store. Now, if you maybe don't like me that much, you can always like, comment, share, and subscribe for more. Also, don't forget to hit that bell so that you can get notified, because YouTube hates me for some reason. Finally, if you want to see more of me, maybe not within the video capacity, I do an RPG Ask Stream show every Monday night from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Magog of Morscar's channel. Maybe if that's not your jam, I also do a bi-weekly stream about the news, advice, and going-ons and more, Sundays and Wednesday nights at 7:30 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Some Dumb Americans channel. Links to both of their channels in the description down below. Peace, bitches.